is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys, provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I do say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals because at the end of the day, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Friday, everybody. I got a very special guest for you guys here today. It's been a minute since he's been on because, like I always say, guys, I only have people who have real jobs on the show. And this guy is out here. He's making it happen. And I got my good friend Adam Wingfield back on the show today to break down all things carrier related. So Adam, thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
No, I appreciate it, man. And it's like, dude, there's been so much stuff that has been coming out here, like for the last couple of weeks, months, however you want to put it. And, you know, it's kind of seemingly like the landscape of things are shaking out there, man. So like, how's everything been going from your end and on the driver's side there?
Man, it's still been tough. Obviously there's a lot of things going spurring regulatory wise, but then there's also a lot of news in terms of economical pressures that are kind of putting more downward pressure on the marketplace. As you see, Cass has indicated that, from their index, they've seen 28 months of consecutive decline. Recently, you've got some of your major financial markets finally understanding that the trucking market is a key indicator of where the economy is going. I think I was leading the complacency letter this morning. There was other financial markets where they were saying, hey, because of where trucking is going, it looks like this is where America is going. So from a sentiment perspective, obviously it's delivering a negative sentiment. But as far as long term, I think that this is a corrective action more than anything else that needs to take place to get us back to pre-COVID levels.
Yeah, and I look at a lot of what I see out there, Adam, is there's a lot of stuff that, obviously I am never a fan of any more government than needed. Like I am as small government as possible, but I feel like we've gotten to the point here where things have just slowly eroded over time, and like the regulation and the oversight just wasn't done. And I feel like there's a lot of stuff coming out that it's like we need to kind of take a hard, and not kind of like we need to take a hard line in the sand and really look at how things are to actually fix them. And I get the whole human element side of things, and I understand a lot of people's stances on it, but like, for us to really like move forward as an industry, I feel like there has to be a hard pause for a certain amount of time so we can kind of put a plan in place here to move the industry forward, because otherwise I just feel like it's just kind of putting Band-Aids and more Band-Aids on stuff and nothing's actually going to get fixed.
No, I totally agree. And I'm a big fan of that as well, from the standpoint of, I don't believe that we need to overregulate, but I do believe that there are lapses in our overall execution of the rules that are already in place. I feel like from a compliance perspective and also from a perspective of just going out and enforcing what we already have on the table, I don't believe that we do a really good job of that. And I'm a big fan of saying, hey, let's pause things until we get this thing sorted and figured out, because the FMCSA as an agency, as a body, has been severely understaffed for quite some time. And they're really just trying to hang on for dear life and what they feel like is the most appropriate way to kind of move forward. So I think this is a good opportunity for us to kind of take a couple of steps back, see what's going on. Let's go ahead and just freeze some things and let's just get to enforcement of the regulations that are already in place.
Yeah, I also look at it too, where it's like I feel like there's such a disconnect between the federal and state level, like implementation of a lot of this stuff, Adam. And I think that's just drawing more and more, inconsistencies out there, right? Like I feel like there's got to be a set way of doing things. And again, like I want to be abundantly clear. I am not a fan of more government at all. I am the prototypical less government as possible. But like when there's rules and regulations that are in place that come down from the FMCSA and the DOT, like there shouldn't be any ways that states can skirt around it, right? And I'm just going to come out and directly say with the ELP and the implementation of that and the enforcement of that, there's been a lot of stuff that has come out here where states have essentially, and not essentially, have came out and said, like, we're not going to enforce it. And I feel like that does not fix anything here. Like, again, if we're going to have standards and laws, they have to be followed.
And the thing about that is, and I agree with that, and I was actually talking to a couple of carriers from California here this week, and the thing that really makes that difficult is that you got to look at the overall regulatory book that's the FMCSA goes by. You know, we're talking about, you know, mile-long regulations that they have to follow. And unfortunately, there are rules that were in there that are not being enforced. And it's almost like, hey, you know, who are we to cherry pick which rules? And this is what the states are saying. Oh, so now we get to cherry pick which rules that we want to put a focus on. If we're not going to focus on this, why do we have to focus on that? So I think that that's part of the problem. But then that's also part of the bigger issue when you don't have federal oversight of a federal agency, and you don't have federal enforcement of a federal agency, and you leave it to a state to have to do that. You're going to have 48 and 50 inconsistencies when it comes down to it. And you just can't get mad at the state for having that inconsistency, because they're at that point like, well, what about this? Well, why are we not going to enforce this with that same energy? So I think that that's part of it. And then, you know, there's so much subjectivity when it comes down to some of those rules as well. And
Yeah.
there's not a lot of good clarity around those. For example, you know, when we think about markings on the side of the truck, and you got a lot of these trucking carriers that are using the taped on signs to the side of the door. Well, the rule said you need to be able to read it from 50 feet out. Okay, well, let's think about enforcement. Does enforcement mean that I just look at it and say, oh, yeah, that looks about 50 feet? Or do I have to take a tape measure it out? And if it's at 49 feet, I have to cite you on a violation. That's when you talk about subjectivity. And the problem with subjectivity, when you don't make it clearly black and white, and you leave room for that error, you leave room for that human to be able to make a decision on, are we going to enforce it or we're not going to enforce it? And that's one of the issues when it comes down to it, specifically around ELP as well. You know, when you think about ELP, when you're taking that test, what does proficiency sound like? What is language proficiency? What is, hey, you know what? Oh, yeah, they were about there, or what does that borderline look like? So I just, when it just comes down to enforcement, the bigger issue around it ultimately is going to fall down into enforcement of the rules that we have. You know, just a few minutes ago, for those that have been watching, Duffy made the announcement this morning that, and I haven't had the chance to go to the Federal Registry and really read it throughout, but definitely basically said, hey, we're pausing all ELPs, we're pausing all non-domiciled CDLs, and until the states become compliant with that, and then, you know, they're, for the ones that are presently in there, they have 2 years to become compliant from what I'm reading for the actual license holders. So again, I need to go in and read it in a little bit more further detail and digest it. But again, that leaves 2 years of subjectivity, and that's one of the issues that I think we have.
No, absolutely. And, you know, so from what came out, so this was what changes immediately, it says, into what Adam's talking about there. This came from the FMCSA. The visas are now restricted to only H-2A, H-2B, and E-2 visa holders. Employment authorization documents no longer are sufficient. Save system verification now mandatory for all applications. Annual in-person renewals required. No more mail-in renewals. And then non-domiciled must be clearly displayed on the license. And, you know, for me, like the one that sticks out to me the most, Adam, is it's that annual in-person renewal. Like, if you're going to do it, like, yes, you should have to be here present in the United States to go in and do that. Right. And again, like I've stated before about the non-domiciled CDLs on this show. And I know that got a ton of traction with that tragic accident that happened out in Florida. Unfortunately, that was just one example of, I think, just a system-wide unenforcement of stuff that kind of led to that. But I feel like that accident, though, to me, was a symptom of the core issue of how, like, certain states, like California, for example, didn't require that you had to even show documentation to get a CDL. And a lot of these guys, and again, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not naive to think that you know, back channel deals don't happen in every state out there, but California was publicized here, so I'm using the California example. And from my stance, it's like, you know, again, if you're going to have a visa or if you're going to have a green card or anything like that, my personal stance is as long as you're following the exact same rules that I have to here as a citizen and paying the same taxes that I do, like, that doesn't affect me at all. And I know that, you know, you go out there on Twitter or any of these social media platforms and you see these guys just spewing nonsense at the end of the day. But I feel like that annual in-person renewal and making sure that, hey, everything's there, it has to be done, I think that's a very massive step, because that will minimize people from being in another area of the world and just mailing that stuff in.
Yeah, and I think that also too, and you made a very good point, because when you look on social media, there's a lot of lazy tapes. They're just BS, just baiting lazy tapes. And one thing I want to caution in anyone on this is that I wouldn't want to consider this a smoking gun, because you got to think about the statement that said, hey, okay, well, 200,000 CDLs are being impacted. Well, this one thing you got to be very cautious on is that just because you possess that CDL doesn't necessarily mean that you're actively using it either. So, when we think about that from that perspective, you may have an active CDL, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're utilizing that CDL. So let's just say 75% of that, right? You think 75% of that 200,000 number, it could be even lower. I don't know. They don't even have an accurate number, which really stood out to me in the announcement, is that they don't even know. They said approximately. I mean, when you're issuing a document, think about that. You're issuing a federal document. The CDL is a federal license. You're issuing that document. You don't even know how many licenses are out there right now.
Yeah.
Which, again, that comes down to enforcement. And it's easy to pile on California. And I know you're just making a reference. And everybody makes it easy to pile on California. But when you look at that, every state's playing a part in that. There's so many, when it came down to, the ATA saying, hey, we got a driver shortage. Well, states are like, oh, hell, let's help you out there. Let's go ahead and get some more CDLs to the place. That's what perpetuates those activities, is when you have a narrative and you have incentives to actually put more CDL holders into the fold. Now the states are giving the schools more money to bring in more drivers. Now they're pumping those drivers back onto the highways. And it's just a mess, man. And I think that ultimately right now, we don't need any more CDL holders. We don't need more trucking companies coming into the fold. We need to figure and sort this thing out. There needs to be better enforcement, man. And I think that there's some obvious things that are being enforced. And there's some not so obvious things. But I just, when it comes down to the ELP mandate, I think it just opens up a box for so many other issues that need to be taken care of and addressed.
Yeah, I also look at it too is obviously I broker freight every single day. I've been brokering freight for a very, very long time. I've talked to a lot of drivers out there, and I do not personally think it's as big of a deal as a lot of people are saying out there. Has there been a couple of instances? Yes, there has been a couple of instances out there, but it's in the minority, right? Like if you go out there in any form of media right now, it's like everybody who's driving a truck can't speak English and nobody can read the roads. That's such a false statement, and it's so far from the truth. Like if anything, it's in a small, I would say less than 1%. Like if I'm going to sit up here and if I'm going to call balls and strikes like I do on this show, when I see that stuff out there, it's a false statement. From my experience, and again, you guys just take this from somebody who's been brokering for 15 plus years at this point, it's less than 1% of the drivers that I've came in contact with that I would be like, they couldn't even speak the language or read the road signs.
No, I agree. That's what I said. I really think my biggest thing is that I don't want people to think that this is all of a sudden a smoking gun that's going to change and fix everything when it comes down to the marketplace. When you think about 200,000, and I'm just going to use that because it's a lazy number to use. When you think about 200,000, and then you think about 2 years, you think about the amount of new people that are going to be coming into the industry, you think about the amount of turnover that takes place in the industry. It's just a revolving door, man. It's just a revolving door. And I just think that ultimately, that when you think about it, when there's a capacity crisis, whether it's too much or not enough, I don't think that this ultimately is going to be one of those things that kind of feathers into it. Now, to your point, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're a non-domiciled CDL holder doesn't mean that you can't read the English language. You can't do those things. So that's another thing that you got to be cautious of. It's not a smoking gun. I think it's not clearly what we need to focus on. There's so many other safety issues that we need to be prepared of within the industry. And you know what? I'm just going to call it for what it is. There are so many cold-blooded, red-blooded Americans that are out there on the highways that speak the English language, have valid CDLs, that are tearing up the highways and doing things that they shouldn't be either. So if you really want to call it out, let's fix the whole thing and not just isolate the problem.
No, I agree with that, right? Like at the end of the day, man, if there's going to be a standard to upheld, it has to be to every single person that is out there. And that's what I was saying about with visa holders and everything else, because people are like, oh, they're coming in and they're stealing our, no, they're not, right? Like at the end of the day, there is a system that the federal government has created a long time ago. Like this isn't a Trump thing. This isn't a Biden thing. This has been in place for a very long time. And my stance is as long as you are held to the exact same standards I am as a business owner, you have to pay the same taxes that I do. You have to follow the same laws and rules that I have to. You're not doing anything wrong at that point, right? So to sit there and point the finger in one direction is just a false statement that a lot of people that you see on social media and even the media doing it. And I hate that shit, right? Like I hate people doing that because like there are a lot of people in this industry who just work hard, they do the right thing and they go home and they are going to be unnecessarily messed with if there is a continued deterioration of standards in this industry, because that's what it boils down to. There, like I would say, if anything, there are no standards at this point. Like I would say this, that there are, because like you like there are people out there who are able to run illegally, that, you know, like let's touch on the ELD resets that's going on out there, man. There's a bunch of that stuff that's going on too. So again, if we're going to talk about safety, like from your stance, Adam, what is the first thing that they should be focusing on?
Man, when you think about that, there's so many things. When we talk about, you roll back to about a year ago, we had drug tests, we had the DOT clearinghouse was one of the issues that we had. We had so many carriers that were allowing drivers to operate that not only have not been registered through the clearinghouse, but have known violations. So you think about the amount of drug and alcohol violations that hit the highways every single day. You think about when you go into, and this is public record, you can go into and search all of the violations that take place. And you look at states from a violation perspective, one of the top violations that go through every single day is not even having a valid CDL. So when you think about that, I'm not talking about ELP and none of that. Let's just call it what it is. It's not having a valid CDL. So that means a hot shotter that's got a 40-foot gooseneck and got a F350 or F450 that's pulling a hot shot that doesn't have a CDL. Or that means that that person that's behind the wheel of the truck maybe has been ruled ineligible because they failed a drug test, or because they haven't gone through the RTD status after you had a registered drug or alcohol violation. And there's so many things from that perspective. Then when you talk about ELDs and the easy manipulation of ELDs, there are ELD companies that allow you to pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what, I need to reset some hours. I need to add some more hours. This was a mistake. There's the PC, where there's abuse of personal conveyance, where you got people that are using personal conveyance laden and using that to substitute and hide hours of service violations. Hours of service is a big issue when it comes down to the industry, because it's a rule, but it's allowed to be subjective because of the loopholes that the ELD provides that it was supposed to replace when we removed the paper logs quite some time ago. So when I look at that and I look at those small components that lead and that feed into that, that really stands out and says we just have a full on-board mess when it comes down to it. And I just think that until we get a staff FMCSA that's able to compartmentalize some of these buckets that need to be addressed, and just dragging this thing along, the fact that we're just dragging everything along, it allows politics to get in place, right? Yeah. So now you've got one administration say we need to focus on that. And now the more you drag along, you got another administration that'll come in and say, you know what, no, we need to focus on that. I think the partisanship within this industry and the way that it's being driven home, and the partisanship behaviors that are starting to take place from a commentary perspective, that's not where we need to be. We need to be down the middle, and we need to start to come up with an equal and fair and equitable process to move forward.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, right? Because like that's the thing that I just do not feel like should happen, and it has, right? Like everything is politicized at this point, right? Like, oh, you voted for Trump, you're clearly this, or oh, you're a Democrat, you're clearly that, and there's no progress that will ever be made if we continue down this path. And I look at, and that's why I am such a proponent of a temporary pause on a lot of this stuff, so we can let's sit down. And again, you guys, the government moves at the speed of molasses, right? Like it's going to take a while, but I feel like for us, I look at it like it's a boat analogy where there's a bunch of different holes and you're just plugging one, and then you have to remove your finger to plug another one, and another hole pops up, and you're playing whack-a-mole essentially at this point. And that's why I feel like it's the smartest thing to do, whether it's a 6-month or an 8-month, I don't know what that number is. Pause everything until we can get stuff in line. That's the only way that progress will be made in fixing and starting to put a plan in place to fix a lot of these things that everybody likes to point the finger at. And I look at it as like, again, your voice matters. Like people need to speak up more on this and like, let's call balls and strikes for what it is, right? Just because you voted one way doesn't mean you have to agree with literally everything they say lockstep and key. You have to keep it real. All right. You really do, because otherwise it's just going to be another matter of time before there's going to be more oversight on a lot of this stuff. And if we're talking about how do we make the roads safer, how do we do all of this stuff, for me, and I've stated this on the show before, it's going to start at the state level with how you actually are issued a CDL. Like there has to be a one set guideline across the board. Like if you're going to be here and you're going to pass the CDL school or however you're going to get it, it has to be done the same everywhere. So it stops the fact that somebody could walk into a certain state and not prove that they've actually done it. And I feel like if you stop them from being able to get on the road, that is a logical first step. Then that puts the most qualified people behind the wheels downstream. Maybe from there, it's like, hey, once you get your CDL, it's mandatory. You have to go into like a 6-month apprenticeship or driver training or something like that. I don't know. But I feel like for me, the issuance of the CDL and the ability to attain a CDL, that's step one.
No, I agree. And I also would take it a step further to say, hey, you know, I've been saying this for over a year now, that we need to cause any new entrance into the actual system from a carrier perspective. Because here's another thing that's not even being happening. Carriers are not even getting safety audits, right? These safety audits are taking way too long to matriculaze. I think that in my opinion, if you're gonna start a trucking company, that safety audit should come first. We need to know for a fact that these carriers are operating under the rules that they're supposed to be when it comes down to everything as simple as, hey, you know what, we're enforcing to make sure that our drivers can speak and read the English language. Hey, we do have an adequate drug and alcohol testing policy. Hey, we are following the rules when it comes down to hours of service. And you need to be able to prove that from the beginning, not a year down the road, because there's so many things that can happen from that process. So I just think that, man, too, is just too, when it comes down to the partisanship side, it's just a lazy ass take. Like, you don't, just because you voted, and you said just because you voted in a specific direction, stop being 100% gung-ho with everything that's being said, regardless of wherever it is. Use common sense and don't be afraid to think. Like, it's so easy and lazy as hell for you to say, okay, you know what? Oh, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. We're going to only follow what they say. Like, that's so stupid. And that's, to me, all that does is continue to drive the wedge between people as a whole. I can't tell you how many times I log into social media and I still see this stupid rhetoric of, oh, well, let's just make the red states do this, or let's just leave the blue states to do that. It's just so stupid. You're dividing and conquering the country. Like, we are the United States. Our people, regardless of who you voted for, we have Americans that are on the highway that are being killed every single day as a result of some of the policies that we have enacted, and then most importantly, some of the lack of enforcement in place that we have. So ultimately, man, I just think that it's more than anything is common sense matters, and then just being smart and sensible matters more than anything. And I just don't see that as much anymore.
Yeah, I think that we're, again, it's that 10-second headline that a lot of people do, and then they formulate an entire opinion based on just one headline. And, again, media companies out there, you guys, that's how they make their money. That's how social media companies make their money, you guys. They have to put out catchy stuff because that's what gets the most eyeballs. And then they can take those eyeballs and then they sell it to advertisers, and it increases their revenue. And that's just the way it's done, you guys. But I look at it there's a lot of stuff out there that is coming out, but I feel like from my perspective, with where things are as an industry and where things are going to continue to progress out there, like, again, I will always call out brokers for what it is. Like, brokers, whether you think of it or not, you are a contributing part of the problems that this industry is facing, right? Like, we're not immune to it because we're brokers. We have to do a better job out there in our carrier selection strategy of the people that we're doing. And then some of these obscene requirements, you guys, I've said it before and I'm going to say it again. You can get away with it right now in an excess capacity market. But at some point in time, the circus and the dog and pony show you drag these drivers through will cost you your business at a certain point when capacity flips.
Yeah, boomerangs always come back in the direction that they originated from. So again, when it comes down to relationships now and how you treat people now is going to come back to you eventually. And that goes for everything and everybody, man. I think that we're in such a weird place as a nation that it's just weird, man. I've been around this earth for 26 years, and I don't think I've experienced the feeling that I feel right now. And I think that now is a time to be more united than divided than ever. And again, I'm just going to stand on what I stand on, man. Don't be a fool. Don't be lazy. And don't think that just because you voted one way or the other way, that you got to follow everything that's being said. If it's not right and you know it's not right, man, don't be a dummy and just use your own common sense, man. The thing is that it's easy for us to be lazy and take a lazy approach. And like you said, speaking up for what you believe in, man, these days it's harder and harder to do that. But always stand 10 toes down, regardless of where you're going to come from.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Adam. And I look at it as it's like you can't be afraid to speak your mind, like no matter what, like at the end of the day. And then guess what? It's okay to have an opinion and then have that opinion change, you guys. And from my perspective, this is why I always wait to report on some of the big headlines and hot button issues that come out in the industry, because 90% of the time, the first wave of information is always false. It's always somebody who's just too gung-ho out there. That's why I always wait until things come out, because like, again, I take what I do on this show very seriously. And I know that there are people who come in and listen to the show and take what I say to heart and they use it out there in their business. So it's like, I don't want to be the first one to report. I'm not TMZ. I'm not headline chasing. I'm chasing meaningful change in the industry. And it's like, again, you don't be afraid to speak your mind. If you don't think that something is right, say something about it, right? Like, again, like you got nothing to be afraid of, you know?
No, you're right. Again, it's easy. We're in an era of news and breaking news, and everybody wants to be the first to report because, again, whether or not you want to grow your social media following, I see that a lot. I see people on here, honestly, Chris, that just post things just so they can grow their social media following. You know, like, I don't want to see, like, you know, and I look at the accident that took place down in Florida. You know, I just think about from the family's perspective, you know, I don't want to see that video posted and used over and over and over and over again. Just think about how that would impact that family if that was your loved one and you have to be constantly reminding of that. It's just people are just so insensitive these days, man. We just lost that humanity, man. And I just see us getting more and more desensitized to things. You know, death has become one of those things that we're becoming more and more desensitized to, and it's just sad, man. I just hate to see stuff like that.
Dude, I agree, man. And same thing with the Charlie Kirk assassination, man. I had to explain that to my 14-year-old son who saw it on TikTok. You know, like that like that thing, man, is like, you're right. Like, people have come completely desensitized to it, you know, no matter what. It's like that accident in Florida. That was somebody's loved one. That was somebody's family member. And it's like, it's just beyond inhumane the amount of times that you see that stuff and people are still out there talking their bullshit about it just to grow their social media following at the end of the day, man. And that's like, dude, I just look at it like this, Adam, like you and I are around the same age when we were younger, you know, we believe in freedom of speech, but we also know, like, if we said something, we might get punched in the face. And I look at today's day and age, man, like some of these people are getting digitally punched in the face for the first time in their life.
Dude, I'm going to tell you, man, social media, Mike Tyson said it best, man. Social media has allowed people to be more comfortable with saying disrespectful things because they're not getting punched in the face for it. And that's a lot of things. Like, I come from the old school, man. I remember growing up, we didn't have social media. We didn't have things. And your freedom of speech, man, you can say whatever you want to say, man. But at the end of the day, man, you're going to have to stand on that when you eventually have to face it. So watch your mouth. You know, I'm going to say that right now. Watch your mouth. And I'm from the old school. You know what I mean?
Dude, I'm right there with you, Adam. I couldn't agree with that more, man. But hey, dude, I appreciate your time today, Adam. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about what you got going on?
Hey, at Adam L. Wingfield on X, on this platform, at Adam L. Wingfield on LinkedIn. You can find me also on email, Adam at innovativegiciousgroup.io. You know, feel free to reach out to me in one of those ways.
Perfect. Adam, I appreciate it. That's going to be it for today, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys can't find Adam, hit me up. I would gladly put you guys in contact with him. As always, if you got value in what you heard, subscribe to the show, you guys. And if you're feeling ambitious after this one, rank the show on iTunes and Spotify, because if you saw value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys. And we'll be talking to you soon.
Came back with a bang. Window down, yelling out money, anything. Hey, ooh, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when I'm getting to the back. Hey, got the foot on the gas. Pedal to the metal when the lane moving fast. Hey.